Dry brush is one of those watercolour techniques that looks complicated, but actually it's very simple. In these finished paintings, I'm showing you where dry brush can go, but I'm not expecting you to start there. I'm going to show you how to get the basics of dry brush, how to use the effect, and I'm going to use tree bark as an example. So let's get started. So dry brush, obviously that means it's not wet, but that's not true. If I take some colour here, I'm taking just a little bit of ultramarine and burnt sienna there, and some water. Now that's giving me a wash, potential wash. So if I put that on the paper as it is with a loaded brush, I get that. And that is regular watercolour laid in with a wet brush. What happens though if I squeeze a little bit of that water out so that there's less in there, and I then try to go across here? I get a broken look because there's less water to fall into the dimples, as it were, of the paper, the texture of the paper, and it's skimming across the surface. Now I've squeezed out water and it's gone a bit paler as well because I've taken some of the pigment out. But this is the principle of dry brush as opposed to this, which is a wash. So how do you do this in practice? Well, the way I personally do it is to have a little bit more pigment in my wash, like this, but less water. So you see how I can actually make marks through this? That means that there is less water there and I can't shake anything out of my brush. Now, if I then take that brush and go across here, I've got more pigment in it, but it's not filling in. So take tissue and you can squeeze some of it out on tissue like that. And again, come back, you'll have less water again on your brush, but it's giving you that dry brush effect. I'm using a cheap synthetic brush here, but you can use most brushes, but some will hold a lot more water than others. So you might need to do this by trial and error. Picking up a little bit of colour like that and then working on the paper is how I do it. So I tend to push my brush down, splay it out a little bit, and then drag it, and I can control how much texture I'm getting to a great degree with that. I can also control the direction of marks, so I can do them like this, for example. I can also make small ones and longer ones. So there's a variety of things you can do to give yourself a range of textures here. Now, of course, you can also effectively draw with your brush too. So if I use the point of my brush here, I can get a single line. This isn't necessarily dry brush doing that because you can do that with a wet brush as well. But it's very useful to be able to switch from doing dry brush marks to then a line and then maybe more dry brush marks. And that's what I'm going to do on a bit of tree branch. So let's look at dry brush in a practical situation. I've been drawing out a tree branch here with a couple of knots in it and a little branch. So there's a few things going on and not something which is easy to do if you're just doing a quick wash. So what I'm going to do is take a brush first and put an underlying colour there. That's the first thing to do with this. You want to get a wet wash on this to start with. Doesn't matter how you do this, you can drag this across the paper, you can leave little bits of white there if you want to, but you need to get the basic shape of the thing you're working on to start with. So that's what I'm going to do here. I've just got a warm grey that I'm using, and I'm going to take that and find the overall shape for the entire thing. Get that off there. I've deliberately put a few bumps and things into it, like I said. So already this is starting to look a little bit three-dimensional because I've got a darker side here, but it's only just. So I'm going to add in some other colours. I'm just going to add in a little touch of a greeny brown into this as well. Get some variations. This is a soft brush, incidentally. This is just a regular, good quality, standard watercolour brush. So it's not a stiff one, it's not an overly soft one, anything like that. It's just a regular brush. Now I'm not worried about leaving a few little white spots. That's good. That will give me little highlight bits in there as well. I'm going to take a little bit more yellow and put that in. A little bit of Hansa yellow in there. Because so often you get mosses and lichens and so on growing on all of these things. And having got all that in place, I'm going to start thinking about the shadow side a little bit more. So make up more of that grey, ultramarine and burnt sienna. And I'm going to drop that in along the bottom. This is nice and quick, as you can see. Doesn't matter where the edges and so on go on this, as long as I've got a shadow side and a lighter side. That will give me a really good start to something like this tree branch. What I have to do now though is let it dry. So switching my brushes, I've now got a small one. This is a synthetic, a very cheap synthetic brush, and it's a number 8 in size. And what I have here on my palette is a more concentrated mix of paint. So there's less water in it. So the excess water is all down here. There's more pigment in this mix. I'm going to splay my brush out a little bit. So I've broken up the end of it so there's no point. And I'm going to use that just to drag some marks across the surface of the paper. So I'm aware of the texture of the watercolor paper itself, and I want to utilize that. So this is giving me some nice, really organic marks all the way through it. My brush is only just wet, and that's why I can have this grazed across the surface really lightly, just giving me this interesting, natural feeling texture. Now I want to get some of this in most places, but I don't want it everywhere. So I'm trying to maintain that colour a little bit as I do this. Now, because there's so little water on my brush, I can control where all of this goes very carefully. I can also draw with it. So using the point of the brush a little bit, still breaking up the sides, dragging it over the edges, I can get all sorts of broken textures. If you're used to drawing, then you'll find this is a really useful technique because it gives you complete control about where everything is going to go. You're just doing it with a brush as opposed to a pencil or a pen. So I've now got a fair bit of texture into this. What I'm going to do is increase the darkness of my colour to increase the tone. So I'm making it a lot stronger. Doesn't matter that much, as long as I'm using the same colours, it's okay, but it's just a darker version of what I was using. And I'm going to go into what would be crevices in this. This is where I can really pull out the character of the actual tree that I'm working on, because obviously barks, they're quite characteristic of certain species. We'll just get a little bit of this in place. Now the one thing I'd say about this technique is that it's very easy to overdo it. Once you sort of get settled in, then it's so simple just to keep working on it because it's not difficult. It's difficult to get the look right, but it's not difficult to carry on working with it. So just a word of caution there, just be careful not to overdo this. It's really very easy. Just try and place in a minimal amount, enough to say what it is you're trying to do, but not too much. So I'm here just trying to put a little bit of an edge around a broken branch that might be coming out here. And we'll have something down at the bottom here. Let's put a little bit of a shadow side underneath that as well. And we can also add in just little extra details, like a little touch of a lichen or moss or something like that coming out at the bottom. So I'm still breaking up my brush and making fractured marks, as it were, really broken marks, as opposed to the wash marks that you get when your brush is fully wet. So that's all I'm going to do. This is, like I said, it's a very seductive medium. It's all to do with the amount of water you've got on your brush, the amount of control, the amount of splitting of the hairs that you have on your brush, the size of your brush, all sorts of things. They will all change what you're doing, but the technique is there nonetheless. So this is dry brush over a wash. So if you find this helpful, please like and subscribe, and have a look at my Patreon channel if you'd like to learn more about watercolour.